What it do, cuckolds? It's your boy, the hater, up in this mug, and it's time for the Backlash review. I forgot to do a SmackDown review because I forgot that SmackDown was even happening. But even if it were, if I'm being 100% honest, like I would have done it today, and then I started watching Backlash, so I thought to myself, like, you know, it makes no sense to go back and do the SmackDown review when we have Backlash today. So here you go, Backlash review. You can expect me to do all the weekly reviews as usual starting this coming week. But you know what I'm saying? I just forgot, cucks. Don't blame me, blame Lee Fitting for having a shitty show. Anyways, we're going to go over this pay-per-view in typical hater fashion, which of course means segment by segment. All right, let's get to it. First of all, some absolute nobody that no one's ever heard of, named Prashad or something like that, comes out and sings the anthem. He was pretty good for the first 3 or 4 seconds that I listened before I fast-forwarded his ass, you know what I mean? First up, we start off with a pretty good match and a pretty exciting match, and in my opinion, the correct match to start the event with. The Fatal 4-Way, right? It was very spotty, like everyone had their moves they were going to do, but it was nevertheless good. There was a spot that obviously was very foreseeable, but nevertheless cool. Jacob Fat Poo was up in the top rope as Drew McIntyre was in the Tree of Woe, you know? And then LA Knight tries to do a superplex on Jacob Fatu, like kind of like over Drew McIntyre's body, and Jacob Fatu just headbutts him off. He just Samoans his ass off, and LA Knight kind of like lands in the position that one would land in when they're about to take a high-flying move, right? Then what happens is Drew McIntyre does that little, you know, kind of like the hanging sit-up, and then he just grabs Fat Poo and does, you know, like a belly-to-belly, like an overhead belly-to-belly, but this is where the spot was cool, because that part I saw coming. But what I didn't see coming is that basically, as he's being thrown, Fat Poo converts this into like a swanton of sorts, lands on LA Knight, and completely no-sells it. I don't like how he no-sold it because it was a move done to him, you know what I mean? We know that like a lot of times the wrestlers don't have to sell a move, but this was something that, you know, he should have sold in my opinion, but nevertheless, like it was innovative. So basically he just does that. Then he like runs and dives out of the ring, hitting Damian Priest, you know what I mean? Then he comes in, whoops Drew McIntyre's ass a little bit, and he does a little, you know, gyration thing, right? Now, the fans were firmly behind Fat Poo, so this match was obviously going to go down one way and one way only, right? His title reign just started. He's kind of involved in a storyline of sorts, whereas the 3 other guys are just doing nothing, you know what I mean? LA Knight has been doing nothing for like 3 years, you know, since he debuted. He's just there wrestling every week, basically. But that's it. He doesn't do anything, you know? He's not in any feud. He's not in any storyline. And the only feuds that he has been in are like, you beat me, so I want to beat you. Yeah, you know what I mean? Or like, Logan Paul, yeah, you have the United States title, and I want to be United States champion. Yeah, and it's like, you're just wasting this guy. This guy could be in actual programs, mid-term to short-term programs with nearly everybody because he has the gift of gab, cucks, but they don't want to do that, so it is what it is. You know, obviously Drew McIntyre and Damian Priest aren't good enough to hold any titles at this point, so they're not going to win, you know? And basically what happens is, Drew McIntyre and Damian Priest start brawling with each other. They end up in the backstage, not backstage, but kind of like to the side, you know, where Damian Priest does a South of Heaven chokeslam on Drew McIntyre onto like, you know, production equipment and shit, you know, that tired old spot. It was pretty cool. But then this turns the match effectively into a one-on-one no DQ match, right? Because it's still a fatal 4-way, meaning there's no DQs. And LA Knight is beating that ass thoroughly. He drapes Fat Poo over the announce table, and he goes up to like the mid rope, but you know, to the outside, and he's about to do the mega star elbow, and that's when Sol Sikoa comes out and just basically, you know, removes Jacob Fat Poo from the table, right? People boo, obviously, because they're about to see like a flying elbow, theoretically, and that didn't happen. At this point is when Jeff Cobb, also known as Rhino, you know what I'm saying, debuts in the WWE. Jeff Cobb does this like basic ass attack. He just like attacks LA Knight slightly, throws him onto the post, you know, then throws him into the ring. He didn't even go into the ring and like do a finisher or something, you know, to make it cool. And then basically Fat Poo just kind of comes to, and Sol Sikoa is like, get in there to like, you know, finish the match, right? Fat Poo's like, what's going on? Like, he's all confused and shit. I don't understand why he's confused. It's like, Sol Sikoa does this. That's how he debuted in the WWE. So why is it weird if he's going to bring in fucking, what's his face? You know, Jeff Cobb, who is some form of islander, you know what I mean? Jeff Cobb, I've seen this guy wrestle a few times in the indies. He's okay, but like, I mean, he's just too small in terms of height for the WWE. Like, I think he's more believable than like the other Samoans because you can just tell this guy's just a brute because he's just like stocky. He's like Rhino. He's built like Rhino, you know what I mean? He also has the same haircut as Rhino and kind of a similar face. But anyways, then Jacob Fatu goes to the ring, does the ass face, and then after that does the prettiest moonsault ever and wins the match, right? So overall, a pretty good match. It did move the story forward with Solo Sikoa continuously recruiting other people for, I guess, his faction, but it does kind of bring the question up of what the hell was the point of like the new bloodline, you know what I mean? Like, why did Jacob Fatu join the new bloodline if he's gonna like just turn his back on them for like no reason, like he's about to do? And why is Solo Sikoa so concerned with being the tribal chief? Clearly, in kayfabe, he can get people to follow him. I guess you could make the argument that Jacob Fat Poo is no longer, you know, by his side for that reason, but that hasn't been articulated yet. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Anyways, after this, you know, the match, like I said, pretty decent, but we move on to the next match, which, I mean, for what it was like an okay match, but it was just too long, you know? It was Lyra Valkyria versus Becky Lynch. Long story short, all you need to know is Lyra Valkyria wins with like a one-armed roll-up type situation, you know what I mean? And this was presented as a fluke victory, right? So immediately after the pin, Becky Lynch, you know, kicks out, I suppose, at 3, right? After she gets pinned, she just like gets out of it, turns around and starts laying the smacketh down on Lyra Valkyria, you know? Ensuring and signaling that this feud is far from over. Now, I don't want to see this feud continue at all personally, but, you know, it did, like, the finish of the match did give some credence to Becky Lynch and the skill gap, right? So the implications weren't that Lyra Valkyria is better or even equal to Becky Lynch. It was just she got a fluke win, you know, and then Becky Lynch like still kind of won the fight, right? So Lyra won the match, but Becky won the fight. You know, it's like those Rey Mysterio matches where he wins with like a Hurricane Rana pin, and then like as he's celebrating, or even before he's celebrating, he gets attacked by like Benoit or Angle or something, like to show that like, all right, this was like a one-off, you know? But it really wasn't a one-off because the whole match was like Lyra Valkyria just getting out of the disarmor, kicking out of manhandle slams. You know, you'd think that Lyra Valkyria was Hulk Hogan, but whatever. You know, for what it was like, okay, you know what I mean? This was a mid-card women's match, you know? And I kind of like the fact that they had the mid-card title on the line and none of the women's titles were on the line because it does give the mid-card title some, I guess you could say, credibility, right? Some value. You know, if Becky Lynch, who's like one of the greatest female wrestlers of all time, according to the WWE, not according to the hater, obviously, you know, if that's going to happen and she's going to go after the jobber title, then it's like, whatever, you know what I mean? We got nothing to worry about. Like, that's perfectly fine by my metrics, you know? So there you have it. I mean, I don't think there's anything more that can be said about this match, but it was what it was, you know? Like, we got nothing against it. You know, it was an acceptable situation. Next up, we've got El Grande Americano basically ruins the Penta and Dominic match. Now, the Penta and Dominic match is a fun little match because it involves Dominic. Penta, in my opinion, if he were to get released tomorrow, like nobody would give a shit, you know? He's already about as relevant as like, you know, Lince Dorado was 3 weeks into his career, you know what I mean? Nobody expects anything out of Penta, you know what I mean? Penta is like literally like 1 month away from being in the Andrade Santos Escobar position of doing fucking nothing with his career. Same thing can be said with Rey Fenix. You know, this was a step down for them. Like the Lucha Bros are never going to be as over in WWE as they were in the Indies. I'm not stupid. I know what they're doing. You know, obviously there's going to be a point where they get together and reform the Lucha Bros because now they're on different shows. But, you know, they're just like holding off on that so that like in the, you know, very small, super small possibility that either one of these guys just like blows up big time. It's never going to happen, you know. But anyways, El Grande Americano does the headbutt on Penta. This leads to, what's it called? Dominic Mysterio hitting the frog splash and winning, right? Now, here's the thing. Before the match, Dominic was saying how he's the best Mysterio of all time. And like, you know, he's doing his shtick, right? How he's the best Intercontinental Champion. He's doing his thing, which I enjoy, right? And I will say this, El Grande Americano, even though he has no direct beef with Penta, I mean, Penta did talk some shit and Rey Fenix did talk some shit to him. So, like, it is what it is. You know what I mean? He did beat Rey Fenix at WrestleMania, which I can't believe that's like a fucking WrestleMania match. But nevertheless, that did happen, right? So with all that being said, like that plus the current trajectory of a Grande Americano as being a luchador that basically like doesn't like luchadors, it's consistent, right? He attacked a luchador. This is perfectly in line with the character that Chad Gable is playing. So I'm okay with this, actually. It wasn't as random as one might think, right? I should note that during this entire show, we had like hours upon hours of commercials, and there was no different after this match. Cuts this. We had more commercials. One of them was for the UFC pay-per-view, which is happening tonight, right? So it's like, some people are going to be like, oh shit, I didn't know UFC was on, cucks. I'm going to go watch that. Now, I know what you're thinking. The pay-per-view element of the UFC starts at 10 p.m., right? But as Michael Cole was talking, the event was happening. The preliminaries were happening, motherfucks, and those are free. So why the hell would anyone want to advertise their direct competition that is happening simultaneously? This is just stupid. I understand that TKO owns both of them, but that's not how it works. One day I'll explain this to you dumb fucks that think this was a normal thing. Actually, I'll do it now real quick. If anyone here remembers the store Lids, it's still around, I think, but it's basically a hat store, right? And back in the day, the hater used to like sneakers and hats a lot, And I went to buy a hat once, and I was at this big mall that's kind of far from where I live because I just happened to be there, right? So I go to the Lids, and I find the hat that I want, I buy it, right? Then I see Champ Sporting Goods. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, why doesn't Champ Sporting Goods just sell hats and just knock out Lids out of business? Then I suggested this to someone that knew a bit more about these things than I did at the time. And this person said, well, it's possible they're owned by the same company, right? So the same company can dip its toes into the same market twice, but in order to not appear as a monopoly, right, they have two stores. So for example, Taco Bell is owned by Pepsi, right? That's why you can't get a goddamn Coke if you go to Taco Bell. But I think the point's made, right? It doesn't matter, right? It would be like Taco Bell advertising Coke, Just because like they own Pepsi doesn't mean that Taco Bell is beholden to Pepsi, but it does, cucks. And that's just bad business. It was really stupid, and I didn't really like it at all, It'd be one thing if the UFC pay-per-view was tomorrow. That makes perfect sense, but it's literally right now. You're competing for an audience. Like TKO is splitting its own audience today, Even scheduling them at the same day is kind of dumb, but there's too many logistics to worry about there. Anyways, after this, we get Gunther versus Pat McAfee. Now, this match is inherently interesting because it involves Pat McAfee, who is not a consistent wrestler. So automatically, the match has some allure to it. However, the match deteriorated into something really stupid because it lasted more than 3 minutes. You have to consider, right? Pat McAfee is the announcer. And while Gunther is a wrestler, and while Pat McAfee is a rather large human being, he's almost the same size as Gunther, right? It doesn't matter. It's not the size always, right? Size is a very big and important factor, but if someone is presented as being a regular dude like Pat McAfee is, then it makes absolutely no sense for him to have any chance against WWE wrestlers who, in the WWE, are presented as being the elite of the elite in terms of athleticism and ability for combat sports, right? It's really that simple, He should have no chance because, for example, Gunther squashed Akira Tozawa, right? So if Gunther squashed Akira Tozawa and Akira Tozawa earns his living wrestling, then why the hell is Pat McAfee better than Akira Tozawa? Because if that's the case, then why the fuck does Akira Tozawa have a job? And why the fuck doesn't Pat McAfee have a job if you're trying to attract the best wrestlers, right? The implications back in the day were that the worst WWE wrestler would beat nearly every wrestler ever outside of the WWE. That's how it was presented, right? So for example, that's why, people wonder, right? That's why I think Jamie Noble is the first ever ROH world champion. He may have been like the second, but I think he was the first ROH world champion, right? And the reason why he was the first ROH world champion was because he was wrestling like 3 other guys who nobody knew. You know what I mean? So they're like, oh, this is Jamie Noble. Yeah, he lost to nearly everybody in the WWE, but he was in the WWE. So he has to be presented as better than like, I don't know, Low Key or whoever the fuck he fought, Or Jerry Lynn, right? He's better than those guys by virtue of the fact that he was in WWE. Jerry Lynn was a jobber in the WWE. He was a Sunday Night Heat jobber and like one time, I think, light heavyweight champion. But in TNA, Jerry Lynn is like, this powerful force. He's like a legend. If AJ Styles beats Jerry Lynn, it's considered this like massive upset, right? And that's how it should be because this guy was in the WWE. Pat McAfee is not in the WWE as a wrestler, so he should be nowhere close to Tozawa, meaning that Gunther should squash him in 1 minute, right? Aside from this, Pat McAfee did a series of kicks, which is consistent with the fact that he was a punter, but it's inconsistent, or was he a long snapper? I think he was a punter. Anyways, which is consistent with that, right? But it's inconsistent with the logic of the match. Gunther was nearly knocked down at a certain point after a series of kicks, and it was presented, not like Gunther was pushed to the limits, but it was presented like Pat McAfee gave him a run for his money. Michael Cole got involved, pulling Gunther's leg and causing almost an upset, right? Wade Barrett was alone on commentary during this match for the large majority of it after Michael Cole got up, and Wade Barrett made some good points in commentary. Like he was like, if Pat McAfee wins, this is the greatest upset in the history of like this industry, right? And that's fair because fundamentally, that's just how it is. You know what I mean? You can't just have that. You can't just have Gunther go out there and be in a situation where basically he is presented as being any form of equivalent with, Pat McAfee, right? He should be like far superior. He should be destroying Pat McAfee. Now, of course, I'm sure some of you are thinking, hater, if that were to happen, it wouldn't make for a very compelling pay-per-view match. I agree, cocksuckers. No one's saying that it would. That's why this match should have happened on Raw, cuckolds. And with that being said, this moves us on, obviously, to the end of the match. Gunther wins with a sleeper, and Pat McAfee doesn't tap out. Michael Cole said he was going to be biased during the commentary, which is odd because Michael Cole's biased in many matches, and he pretends that he's not. Like, that's the thing. It's like he's biased against the heels. That's his character. Like, Michael Cole is so bad at his job that he doesn't even understand what his character is. He's clearly the guy that's biased towards the faces, except for when he was a heel, and it was the other way around. Now, we go to our almost great main event, right? They do a little recap of the history between Cena and Orton. The match itself had a lot of good things, right? Number one, it was obviously an interesting dynamic. The way that Randy Orton wrestles is that it's slow and methodical. And this works well against John Cena historically, but only against face John Cena, right? Because the implications are Randy Orton's going to ground him down. He's going to grind him down as well. And as he's grounding him and grinding him, then eventually Cena's going to come up, do the comeback, and then eventually hit an AA or the STF for the win, right? That's usually the formula of these matches. The formula was virtually the same, except Cena, right, cannot do the explosive things that he's supposed to do because the fans either are not going to be behind him or should not be behind him, right? So Cena is kind of restricted. So the match was very, very interesting and awkward like that, right? There was a shitload of finishers and a shitload of kickouts. This is acceptable because we're talking about Cena and Orton, two of the all-time greats. However, it did get out of hand at a certain point, right? The match then, this match that was a pretty good match, I would say one of the better, definitely one of the better, I would say one of the best Orton-Cena matches. But it was ruined and it was turned into the worst Orton and Cena match of all time. And in my opinion, the finish of this match ranks up there with Seth Rollins and The Fiend at Hell in a Cell. It's just as stupid, This was really, really bad. Basically what happens is, after the match has gone on for a fucking eternity, Orton has Cena where he wants him, in the corner on his hands and knees. Orton readies the punt, right? He's going to hit the punt, and he's going to pin Cena's jobber ass, right? This is after Cena's kicked out of, like, multiple RKOs. He kicked out of 2 AAs, like Orton did AAs to Cena, you know what I mean? He kicked out of a lot of shit, right? So he goes in there, and then, of course, we have the heel moment, right? We have the moment that makes the match not clean, right? There was, like, several ref bumps during the match. R-Truth comes out, right? R-Truth, who is a man in his 50s, he's older than both Cena and Orton. If he's not in his 50s, he's in his very late 40s. He's older than both of them, right? He comes out, K-Quick, motherfucks, comes out and basically stops Orton from punting Cena. Now, the ref's not down, so like even if R-Truth touches him, there's no DQ, but think about what I just said, right? This is not a throwaway Raw match. This is a main event on a pay-per-view on the 17th title run of the greatest wrestler of all time. There is no room, motherfucks, for R-Truth in this match. The philosophy is, and this is why WWE is very, very bad, because this is something that normally I would like. I like when wrestlers act consistent to their character. And R-Truth, bless his heart, is acting consistently with the character of R-Truth. Now, the character of R-Truth is that he is mentally retarded. Like, there is no other way to explain this. R-Truth is mentally retarded. So basically, WWE, Raw, allows R-Truth, a mentally retarded individual, to just run around and perform in their show. They let R-Truth wrestle, even though, like, if this were real, he would be like retarded. You know, he would be in like a retarded people home, right? So R-Truth's retarded character, right? Forrest Gump himself comes into the ring and he stops Orton from hurting his childhood hero, John Cena. Think about what I just said. The 50-something-year-old retard comes in to stop the crazy guy who hears voices from kicking the balding hero turned heel in the head because he's the crazy retard's childhood hero. Do you understand how fucking stupid that is? It is incredibly dumb, you know? And with that being said, that is all that's needed. Orton hits the RKO on R-Truth. The referee is down as Orton looks to the outside. Cena gets up, low blow to Orton, gets the belt, smashes him in the head, pins him. You can count to 100. The ref comes in, 1, 2, 3. Cena wins. Afterwards, Cena cuts a short promo about how basically he's the champ and like nothing can stop him. You know what I mean? So there you have it, right? Like Cena, one more title defense under his belt. I guess that's the first title defense, but you know that's more than Cody did. Like I don't think Cody wrestled at Backlash. Yeah. But anyways, maybe he did. Maybe he wrestled on Stage Styles or something. But this was a big match. It was an exciting match. But the finish of it, I just can't get past the finish of it. It really, really ruined the match, right? Because it's not like, for example, let's say Solo Sikoa interfered, right? Well, then next week, Solo Sikoa can be confronted by Randy Orton, right? In this case, all that happened was Randy Orton RKO'd a retarded elderly man. You know what I mean? And then that's it. Like, Randy Orton doesn't have the standing to, on Monday Night Raw, let's say, come out and say, R-Truth, you cost me the title, I want payback. Because Randy Orton knows deep inside that R-Truth is retarded. So he's not going to be able to take it out on R-Truth, right? It's just like when they had Hornswoggle as a face, and like the faces could never take out their aggression on Hornswoggle because Hornswoggle is a little guy, right? So it's like a face is going to have to let Hornswoggle just bother him forever before they can even do anything. You know what I mean? And this is the same situation that Randy Orton finds himself in, I think. So with all that being said, the question then becomes, what's next, right? Well, I mean, I don't know if Cena's going to be there on Raw or SmackDown. But if he is, then maybe he's going to have a segment with R-Truth where Cena just like destroys R-Truth. You know what I mean? He just destroys R-Truth to really make the fans hate him because R-Truth is presented like Hornswoggle. People who have physical or mental handicaps are people that we often, in my opinion, unjustifiably so, give pity to. I think it's condescending and all that, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, like, if he beats up R-Truth at this juncture, it's like beating up Hornswoggle because R-Truth is retarded, right? So then after that, maybe R-Truth can actually get a match against Cena. That should be one of the matches like before Cena retires. Cena versus R-Truth, in a throwaway Raw match, right? And then the last thing I want to say about this match is that, in my personal opinion, this match, even though it had some good moments, in my opinion, this match would have been better. Obviously, you'd have to change the ending. But, I mean, is this ending any worse than, like, Travis Scott? I don't know. I think someone could make an argument one way or the other. I think this is worse, obviously, because at the very least, like Travis Scott, even though he may appear to be retarded to many people, he's not presented as being retarded. So, this was really bad. But in my opinion, this match, obviously, a lot of things would have to change for what I'm about to say. But this match should have been the main event of WrestleMania. The match was better than Cena versus Cody, if you take away the R-Truth part, right? Even if you take away the Travis Scott and the R-Truth part, if you take them both out, right? This match was superior in my opinion. But this match felt like a big deal. right? There would have been nothing wrong with the Cuckster himself dropping the title to Cena, like at the Royal Rumble or something, right? And then Cody Rhodes could have had like a match versus, I don't know, some other jobber, at what's it called? At WrestleMania, right? Could have been him versus, I don't know, Roman Reigns. They could have made that a fatal four-way, Put in Cody Rhodes and have the Paul Heyman on a pole match, right? That would actually make it more interesting. But you see what I'm getting at here, right? The point is, you could say whatever you want, but this match would have made a better WrestleMania, match than Cucky versus Cena. And especially if like somehow Orton was the champion and Cena got it from Orton, like that'd be more interesting. But whatever, right? Even if that's not the case, you could have had Cody drop it the month before, and then Cena has the real match at WrestleMania, the WrestleMania caliber match. I understand there's other issues. Like this was in St. Louis, and you want the St. Louis people to see Randy Orton. So like Mania wasn't in St. Louis, but that's neither here nor there. The point is plan better. You know what I mean? And with that being said, take care of yourselves, motherfucks. I give this event like a 4 out of 10. It wasn't anything special, but it had some good matches. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. So which to me is like below average, because I don't go with like the 5 is average, because to me like that's a 5 is an E in school, right? A 5 is you failed. Like a 7 out of 10 is like mediocre to me, like that's how I look at these things. So that being said, take care of yourselves. Cuts this.